Ben Silverio.
And I'm Ansel Burch.
And it's
time to party. Wah, 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 wah. We're not doctors. We don't give medical advice. Please drink responsibly. This episode was recorded on April 16th, 2024. Ben, what a big day.
What a big few months.
Yeah. Oh, look at us. We're on the up
Talking
and
to
up.
people. It's nice getting to talk to people about cool stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Ah, man. I feel all special.
Right? So if you're just joining us, meaning you haven't checked out the previous 3 episodes, we've been talking about the amazing movie, The Greatest Hits, the new time travel romance on Hulu. And we were fortunate enough to speak to the writer, director, Ned Benson.
What a freaking thrill. What a joy.
Yes, we had a great conversation. You've heard bits and pieces of it over the course of the month, but if you were looking to listen to the whole thing uninterrupted, this episode is for you.
Yeah, good news. Here it is in its glory, unexpurgated, except for all the parts where we said
Sure. I know.
I will expurgate the ums, and I won't feel bad about it.
I'm glad. I'm sure that people may be disappointed that they don't get our tangents and outtakes this time, but don't worry, they're probably still in there in spirit.
Yeah, I'm sure we found something. We'll get a bonus episode. It'll be great.
Sure. There you go. We're just a podcast that keeps on giving.
If you heard that audio, you know that it's that it happened, and if you didn't hear that audio, you have no idea.
Right.
I'm not talking.
All right.
Yeah, let's.
Well, all right. Shall we throw it to ourselves in the past?
Ourselves of the past? Yeah. Ooh, you're about to have the best hour.
Thanks, future selves. Ned Benson, director, writer, producer of The Greatest Hits. Thank you for joining us here on Time to Party.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, our audience may know your previous work from The Disappearance of Eleanor Rigby or Black Widow. And when The Greatest Hits hit South by Southwest, I had so many people hitting me up being like, Ben, you're going to love this movie. Ben, this movie is for you. Ben, you need to cover this movie. So that's when I reached out to Searchlight right away because I really wanted to talk to you about this. So, I love the intermingling of music, nostalgia, and grief. I was thinking about it, and it's like my teens were Perks of Being a Wallflower. My college years were 500 Days of Summer, and now The Greatest Hits feels like right now. So, for you, what inspired you to tell this story?
Well, I initially read this book by Oliver Sacks called Musicophilia, and that's really about how music interacts with the brain and ideas like musical hallucinations and synesthesia. That compounded with the fact that I'm like profoundly affected by music, like music so specifically throws me to so many moments in my life in like crazy detail. So it is weirdly a time travel mechanism for me. So I kind of utilize those two ideas to come up with a concept and an original draft that I put down in like 2008, 2009, and then put it away for a long time because I got busy with other stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
It's amazing to see something that's been in the cooker that long and finally getting to have its moment in the sun. So it was a privilege to get to see it and hear your reactions afterward.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm so happy you guys were there at that screening. So fun.
Yeah, prior to reading the book, what was your relationship with time travel media and stories?
I mean, I had seen Back to the Future 487,000 times. There's a movie called Je t'aime that I really love by Alan Resnais that's just a beautiful movie as well that deals with, limited time travel and kind of psychology and emotion. That was definitely inspirational. Yeah, I mean, I think any movie that dealt with time travel was really, yeah, fun for me. But those were the two big ones.
And did they really help you determine the rules of time travel for your universe here?
I think with this one, it was there's always just this trick of how are we going to do this and what are the rules. And I think for this movie, it became the duration of the song that kind of like created the parameters for how long Harry could go back for in each instance, and that essentially that she couldn't change anything that anyone else did, but she could change things that she did to a degree. And that kind of is based on this idea of memory. I wanted to ground it in emotion. I wanted to ground it in psychology. And rather than it be literal time travel, I wanted it to feel like it was an emotional extension of Harriet, that like
Mm.
this could be a hallucination and this could be a psychological issue for her. And the power of that emotion is actually what gives the device or gives the actual affliction she has, um, you know its capacity to do what it does towards the end of the movie, if that makes any
Absolutely. I'm
sense.
glad you brought that
Yeah.
up because there was that moment where she's talking to David while playing the record, being like, suspend your disbelief for a minute. And up until that point, the
Mhm.
audience could really make a good case to be like, oh, no, this is all in her head. This is just what she's going through mentally. But then seeing that, if they didn't get on board on the way there, they definitely got on board at that point, along with David.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what I was trying to do is create a metaphor for relationships in general. Like the things that we do and the things that we have to open ourselves up to in order to really fall for somebody and allow them to fall for us. That's like the gift of the magi right in that moment there, where these people are sacrificing parts of themselves in order to really understand each other. And I think that moment's like the crux of the movie. It's her really like doing everything she can to prove it to him. And I think the emotional power is so immense for her that she's able to accomplish that, and he's able to really see her and see it clearly for the first time. Not only because he's accepted her, but she's accepted him.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you feel like that was the thesis of the film for you, or does it go back to that the beautiful power of humanity is the ability to move on?
I mean, that's definitely a big theme. I think that theme is the overall theme of the movie. This emotional power of music that reminds us to live our lives, and you know we're both caught in the past, but in order to let go of that, we do have to move on, and we do have to be open to new experience. But I do think there was this like overarching metaphor of relationships. Like, obviously in a relationship, you let go of your ex, someone like Max, not because he dies, but if you break up with them, they go on and become a stranger. Like, you don't
Mm-hmm.
know them after that relationship. Like, their lives sort of veer off from yours, and they become another person that you don't know the everyday existence of anymore. So there's this concept of Max was going to become a stranger if they didn't wind up together. And same thing with David. Is like it's not necessarily the literal death of him, but it is kind of the death of the relationship, that I was playing with as well. So
Yeah, as the writer of the piece, I think we get a little bit of your answer in the movie, but like, I'm just wondering, do you think you would have made the same decision that Harriet made in the end?
yes, I think where I was at when I revisited the script in 2020 was that we have the capacity in our hearts to love more than one person, to have multiple great loves in our lives, and to appreciate the experience that we've had with those people and how they define us as human beings. And I think part of that is this: we have to be healthy enough and willing enough to let go of that in order to move on to something and allow yourself to be fully present with someone new. So this idea of past infecting the present, or your future, I think was really a lot of the themes that I was, or another theme that I was playing
I
with.
really liked how you kind of encompassed that when the doctor, played by the amazing Retta, who I want to get to in a minute,
Mm-hmm.
but I love that moment where she's just like, "Live your dash."
Mm-hmm.
Where did that come from? How did that hit you at the right time to include it here?
It's funny. I think it was something I read. It was like it was like it was like a very cheesy like greeting card kind of thing that I saw, and I
It's
was
like an
like, wow, this is
Instagram
like,
post with
yeah, it was like
airbrushing.
perfect. It was just like, what's like a wonderfully kind of like saccharine but very true and real kind of like thing that would describe how she would talk about her ex and or her dead husband, and like that he reminded her. And this there is this truth to the fact when you look at a tombstone, it's like the dash is the life lived between these dates. And I think that's another lesson I wanted the movie to about, is like it's reminding, Harriet, it has to remind herself to live her life, and David is helping her remind her to do that. But she is kind of like buttressed off from the world. She's like hid herself from experience, and is, soundproofed her house, and like has kind of cordoned herself off from the world. And part of that is figuring out how to really re-engage into to life again.
Mhm.
And strangely, or not strangely, I mean, I rewrote the script during COVID when we were all, you know, in isolation and kind
Yeah.
of cordoned off from the world. So I think there's a bit of that in there too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really appreciated how Morris simultaneously maintained a safe space for her to do that while
Mm-hmm.
trying to push her to leave that safety. I thought that was a really amazing dichotomy, as well as the scene where Morris establishes, you probably weren't going to be with him forever. Max
Mm-hmm.
was not everything that you're making him out to be. You're only fixated because he died. And I
Yep.
thought that was such a powerful thing to acknowledge, is like, you don't know what the time after might have looked like.
Yep.
So I really appreciated you including that in there as well. It was a really, I don't know, I feel like that's something we don't see very often in media that is about someone who has passed.
Yeah, I think there's this interesting thing about life, is that none of us know who we are 5 years from now. You know what I mean? Like, we're exactly who we think we are now, but if you look back to yourself in college, you're like, well, I'm not that guy anymore. You know?
Hmm.
And I think it's the
And that
same
guy
thing.
has no idea who you would be.
Exactly. And you all can, it's just this idea of versions of yourself throughout life. And I think what Morris is imparting there is like, you have no idea, what whether this would have worked out. Maybe it would. Maybe you get married, maybe you have kids, maybe you live happily ever after. But also, like, maybe it was not working, and she's looking at that relationship through rose-colored glasses. She's looking at all the greatest hits, you know.
Yeah.
So she's not really like examining the tough stuff. Like, we're getting like the life that she's living is just the rose-colored version that she wants to visit every night
Yeah.
in the comfort of her own home, you know. And she's not willing to really like re-engage outside of that. So I think part of it really is this, her recognizing that, okay, like, Morris is right, and if I don't do this, I'm just going to be trapped in this time loop for the rest of my life. Like, I'm going to be stuck
Yeah.
in the past. And I think as people, we do that sometimes. I think we do get caught up
Yeah.
in nostalgia, and we get caught up in incident from our life that we can't get over, And I have, I certainly have friends in my life who suffer from anxiety or depression, and it's very hard as uh, from sort of a place of altitude to look at someone and be like, hey, snap out of it, when you're not that person, because
Right.
our experience is so personal. So I think for someone like Harriet, who's going through something that no one else can understand, it's her emotional experience, and maybe people get frustrated with it from the outside, and Morris is the last man standing. I think it's really that complex idea of being a friend too. It's like you want to help them, but you also like you aren't them and you don't understand what they're going through. And I think when David really sees her and tries to recognize her and understand what she's going through, the analogy for any psychological condition is there, you know?
Yeah.
It's his acceptance of like, okay, you're going through this and I'm going to do the best that I can. I can't change you, but I'm here to stand next to you,
Yeah.
and go through this with you. That's I think that's what was necessary for her to understand that she could move on, that is possible, and that if she does let go of all of this, that you know she's open to experience again and what life puts in front of her as opposed to what's sitting behind.
That silent rave scene
Oh,
was a stroke of genius.
so good. So good. I want to go to one now.
They're fun. I mean, I think that was a really amazing scene and really amazing night because I definitely wanted a silent disco, just obviously because of what the story is and the headphones of it all, and like this gift that David gives her in terms of like subverting the actual event that they're at and taking off the headphones. But this abandoned Sears building, which is like where an old Sears store was, and all their manufacturing and whatever was going on, and it's completely. It was a terrifying building with these two old freight elevators that made all of our crew and cast. We're like hundreds of people going up these like two elevators with COVID restrictions. It's like dust. There's like birds and pigeons and like it just was like out of some. It was like being in The Crow or something. You know what I mean? It just was like. And then we get to and then the last two floors, there's no elevator and you have to walk upstairs. So we lug all the equipment up there. You get to the top of that building and it's just the most awesome view of Los Angeles. You just have the hills and you're like below downtown. So you're looking downtown west. And it was like just such a gorgeous night. And we did have this little silent disco up there. Brian Lott, who is the composer of the movie, was the DJ. And we hooked everybody in to listen to music, and they were all dancing, and those guys walked out there, and it was just a special
That's
night.
really awesome. I love how LA is almost like another character in the movie because of how much character you get of the city. I've recently moved back here because I lived in Santa Monica like 15 years ago, but I moved back for work now, and getting reacquainted with the city and getting to learn all these crazy things that happen here, like warehouse parties and bonfires on the beach and all that stuff, silent discos on the top of abandoned buildings. So what was the filming process like for you? Like, how tough of a shoot was this?
It was like an amazing shoot. Like it was awesome. I mean, I'm not saying it was easy because like we shot on location in Los Angeles. Obviously, to your point, Ben, I really wanted this to be a love letter to LA. In fact, I think if you live in LA, you'll probably understand the movie best. Like I feel like we screened it last night. We premiered last night at the El Capitan, and I didn't sit through, but I know that was one of the best contexts to watch the movie in because I think you're getting all the LA inside jokes and the deep cuts and stuff like that. So that was fun, but it was definitely we were lugging a big footprint around LA, and I think we were dealing with we were shooting in Echo Park, and it's like everything. It was like a Murphy's Law day. We had like 4 planes and 2 helicopters, and then like sirens, and then actually there was a manhunt. Like some guy who was like barefoot and shirtless, like ran through our set, and then all of a sudden there was like police helicopters, police running through the set. They like apprehend this guy, and he like actually ran through our set and said, I think he said something ridiculous to like one of the crew, but like, we just had days where you're like, you're at the mercy of LA. You're like, it's an exercise in controlling chaos. We shot the outside lands, like the Jamie XX concert where, Harriet is with Morris at that show and meets Max and also says goodbye to Max. But like a news chopper just like decided to park over us, like in the sky, and like was ruining sound. So we're just like, dude, come on, move. And like you could tell like they had a camera like look, and we're just like, fuck off, like leave, like that whole, and I have these like extras that are like, it's like it was like 150 extras. It's hot, trying to get the scene. Like there's just a lot going on, and I don't want people to get dehydrated. It's just like it was just you're at the mercy sometimes when you're shooting on location in these big cities. I've done it in New York, and that was madness too. But it's also like part of the fun, and you know, and I think this was a really like charmed experience because like it was such an awesome crew. It's such an amazing creative team. The actors are such special people. They're like family to me now. I mean, we were all very emotional last night at the premiere, like because that was kind of like the button on this whole thing. And I know we're all gonna stay in each other's lives, but like see we when we saw you this week, we were running around together, and it was just so much fun, like getting to screen the movie for people and talk about it and see people react to it and understand it in the way that I hope that they would. I mean, obviously some people don't, but you can't. That's what making movies is about. It's the dialogue. It's the fun of like talking about it, and the cultural capital of that.
Yes.
So I think that's.
Oh, I love that. I got into the filmmaking process because of the collaborative nature of telling this story, and it's so good to hear that the cast and crew were so collaborative and like a big team and family for that. But now that you brought up the cast, I just wanted to touch on the process of casting these amazing performers. I mean, Justin Min is a heartthrob that no one is talking about, and he needs to be in more stuff.
Reluctant heartthrob.
Yep.
He is a heartthrob, and he's also just like a gem of a human being. Like he's one of the nicest, sweetest people. Obviously, very talented actor. But very. He's been so lovely to work with. My wife and I call him our adopted son now, because like when we've been traveling around with him, we're just like taking him through security and all that. It's been fun. So,
how about your process working with Lucy? Since Harriet has to carry a lot of emotional weight in this movie, what was it like guiding her through your vision and her process and things like that?
It was awesome. I mean, we met, she'd read the script, and we met in a coffee shop in LA on Melrose. And she walked through the door, and I was like, oh, that's Harriet. Like, she was wearing the clothes. She was like doing the thing. I was like, she was carrying a book. I was just like, this is like crazy. So then we sat down and had this like amazing conversation. And, she really got the movie. I think she really wanted to understand, like, I think when everybody like reads science fiction, or time travel on a page, they're like, what the hell is this going to look like? Is this going to be stupid and ridiculous? And I was like, no, we're going to try and shoot it practically. We're going to ground it. And I think once she understood what I was trying to do there and how I would execute it, she felt more comfortable. And yeah, then we got in this big dialogue and figured out the character and a lot of rehearsal. And I love her. Like, she's so talented, such a phenomenal actor, and just like the best person. Like, I'm going to say this about all four of the actors. It'll just be like a redundant kind of.
They're all the best actor. Yeah.
No, they're all like, I lucked out. It's like
they are incredible.
They're four really exceptional, like up and coming actors. And like, that's part of that's luck of the draw for me. But, like I think 90% of my job is casting to a degree, because like when you have the right actors to carry your movie, like it's much easier on the day because you can trust them. And we have a consistent dialogue on like what needs to be adjusted and how to find the scene together. But I think that, again, it's that trust in each other that was inherent from the beginning.
And now James Gunn is trusting David with becoming one of the most iconic characters of all time. I'm sure you're over the moon excited to see David as Superman.
I mean, so happy for him. I mean, when I first met him, I was like, this guy is Clark Kent. Like we literally was like, he looks like Clark Kent. And he was clean shaven, and I was like, he's too Clark Kent. Like for this character, I think he needs like a beard, and he needs some facial hair, and we need to scruff him up because he's such like a tall, like like the dimple, like the whole thing. You're just like that's like Clark Kent walking into your movie, and like I needed him to be sort of this like rougher around the edges musician type, and
Was it
that's a
Mumford and Sons
testament to him.
cousin?
Yeah, exactly. He just a lovely guy. I mean, such a great guy and such a great actor. Like, comes from that Juilliard background, like knows how to prepare, will grill you with questions, in the best way. But he's just awesome.
Speaking of David's character, Max, I want to get into like Easter eggs and things later, but I'm just wondering, since we're talking about David, Harriet in the chair, is it supposed to be the Maxwell cassette tape blown away guy? That's totally on purpose because of Max.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, not quite with the. I mean, there's like a little like allusion to that for sure, but the setup obviously was based on that Max L ad. Just for like a music lover Easter egg for sure.
Oh yeah, I remember sitting in the theater like seeing that. I'm just like, hey, blown away guy.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
But two more of your actors that I want to talk about are Retta and Nelly Furtado.
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain how they boarded the project?
Cassandra Koulakundis, who was a producer on the film and also comes from a casting background, and she worked with me on my last film, thought Retta would be great for Dr. Bartlett. And I was like, I mean, I would love that. And the studio, Searchlight thought it was a good idea. And then we reached out to her, and, she's like, oh, Retta said yes. And I was like, okay. I was like, does she want to meet? She's like, no, she's good. She's in. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And obviously she's just one of the funniest people ever. But so talented and just like so lovely on the day. Like we had so much fun shooting those scenes, and she's just such an awesome actor.
Oh yeah.
Did you manage to get all of that coverage in one day for the support groups?
I think we did that over 2 days because we had a bunch of scenes to cover, and we had to be inside and outside, and I needed to get right light and stuff like that. So, but I think we did shoot Retta's stuff out in 1 day. Maybe it was 2. I have to look, but it was 1 or 2 days.
Cool.
So
impressive.
Yeah, but going back to Nelly Furtado, not only does she make a cameo in the movie, but she worked with Ryan Lott on a song. One of her songs became, a milestone for Harriet and David. Like, well, how did that relationship form?
So when I was like working on the scripts, when Searchlight said, we're going to make this movie, I was thinking about that scene and like what songs, if he's flipping through the radio and it's like this Russian roulette moment, right? Like she doesn't know what's happening. And I just wanted to get like the texture of LA radio, where you can go from like, the country channel to like the new wave channel to like the old like Zydeco channel to like whatever, like all over the place. And then you hit a top 40 and I'm like, all right, what's the track? What's the track there that is nostalgic, would still be, playing on like hits like Kiss FM or whatever it is, like what is that track? And it was funny because like I was talking to my wife, and my wife was laughing because when she was 18, the ringtone on her phone was Promiscuous by Nelly Furtado. Nice. And what's funny is like we saw Nelly yesterday and we played it during the day yesterday because she was getting so excited. But I was like, well, it can't be that track. But then I was like, what about I'm Like a Bird? And I brought it up with a few people, and they're like, yes. I mean, like, because that was a big track for me, and I remember
Oh yeah.
my my brother used to listen to that song all the time, and so I was like, okay, well, I brought it up to Mary Ramos, who's our music supervisor, and she's like, all right, well, let me clear it, but I'm also like close with Nelly's team, so let me like reach out. I was like, it would be interesting if we have a callback to the end of the movie when Harriet's moved on, and it's based on one of the songs in the movie that we hear. Whether like it comes from Phoebe Bridgers or Lana Del Rey or like Nelly or whatever. And she's like, well, let's reach out to Nelly. So I was like, okay. And then like 2 days later, she's like, okay, I'm on FaceTime with Nelly. And then like I grabbed the phone and I still have the FaceTime. Like I was like, holy shit, like I'm on FaceTime with Nelly Furtado. Like this is iconic. And she was like, well, I'd love to do the movie. Like I'd love to be a part of it. So I thought, okay, we'll get her for that scene. And then on top of that, like Ryan and I were talking about an original song, and then Mary was like, well, what about with Nelly? And I was like, oh, well, that like, is that would she do that? And she's like, yeah. So I was like, okay. So it kind of became this three-pronged, like, amazing kind of occurrence that, she was just into it and she was down to do it, and she showed up on set and she was such a pro and she was so sweet. And we did a bunch of takes. She had a good time. We shot in
What kismet.
yeah, we shot in the same studio that Prince recorded Purple Rain.
Oh man.
Wow.
Which was really cool. And yeah, it was great. And I love the track that she and Ryan did. Like, I think it's great. And then, when you get into that new present for Harriet, I wanted that track to play and then land in the recording studio. So it becomes diegetic.
Yes.
All of a sudden you see Harriet back as a sound engineer working with Nelly. And, that she's back to what she was doing in the past and then had to give up. So
I love walking into those spaces where like these iconic things were created. Like when I went to Memphis, I went to Sun Studios, holding the microphone there, like all the greats that touch this piano, things like that. So for that scene in this movie, which already has a lot of sentimentality and nostalgia, to happen in a place like that, that's really cool.
Yeah, no, we found a lot of really fun, cool spaces that had some history to them. So that was definitely a big one.
So with everything falling into place with Nelly and her music and creating that original song, were there any songs that you had initially written into the script that they were like, no, we can't do that?
There were two. I wanted Prince. It's gonna be lonely from his first self-titled album, which didn't. I mean, first of all, it was too expensive, and second of all, it didn't quite work with the scene. But I love that track. And then there was a track by the Tramps called "Can We Come Together." There was a remix of it, and the licensing on that remix, there were like so many different people that were involved, and some of them were like impossible to reach, so we like couldn't license that track. I mean, I think the funny thing about people who like look at a soundtrack and they're just like, oh, like you can have whatever music you want in a movie. You're like, no, like
Yeah.
some of these songs cost like $300,000, $500,000, $1 million a play, like for whatever, and people don't have that budget. I mean, we had a good music budget for Searchlight. I think one of the better Searchlight music budgets, but you still have to operate within that budget. So you can't have everything you want, like, and you have to create a fabric. And yes, there's more expensive stuff, and then you have to sort of like, it's this puzzle you're building with what you can afford and what kind of deals the music supervisor can get, and who's agreeing to do stuff. I mean, obviously Roxy Music agreed to be in the movie. I had that song in the film, and then they agreed to be in the concert, and
What a
they
gang.
were an awesome. I mean, again, Mary and Brian Laux, their agent, like was super supportive in making that happen, and they agreed to it. that was super cool. But it wasn't like I was going to be like, I think some people are like the greatest hits, like it's going to be the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. And like, I was like, if I did those two alone, that would be like double
The whole
the
budget.
budget of the movie.
Yeah.
Just for like two song keys, So I think it was funny. I brought up Fleetwood Mac, and like Mary Ramos like laughed in my face. She was like, "Are you insane?" I was like, "All right, cool." So I think it's an interesting process, like finding the fabric, particularly for a movie like this, which was so music based.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that we really paid attention to and wanted to do from the start was that the songs were lyrically helping you tell the story. So if you pay attention to the lyrics of each of these tracks, they're giving you the subtext for each of the scenes that they're in.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's like "This Is the Day" by The, or "Loud Places" by Jamie XX, or "Don't Push It, Don't Force It" by Leon Haywood with Morris, or like "Make Me Believe in You," like by Patty Joe. Like all of these things are helping tell the story, and that was something we as a group really worked hard
And you
on.
totally nailed it. It reminded me of like James Gunn, Edgar Wright level theming, in the scenes that you're presenting, and it totally melded together so well.
Yeah. I mean, those guys are. I mean, the music in their movies is so good. So if we can hold a candle to them, I feel good.
Oh man.
I would honestly say you may do it a little bit better. I'll put it out there.
Thanks.
I was curious about the distinction you made between which songs were going to be diegetic and which ones weren't. How did you make that distinction in a movie that so freely flows between soundtrack and diegesis?
I think majority I wanted to be diegetic. They all kind of exist in the spaces of the movie. There are a few moments where it does kind of like merge with score and take over and become more of a score moment and non-diegetic moment. So like when Nelly Furtado, like "I'm Like a Bird," it starts diegetic, but then kind of like builds and kind of takes over the sequence at the end. I think it was like looking at moments like that. I also we did these overlays with Ryan Lott. We called them overlays, but he did these beautiful kind of like extra elements that would harmonize with the diegetic song. So like at the Bears in Space Disco, when they're dancing together, he would have a piece that just would slowly come in and kind of harmonize and then kind of take over the song for a second. So it became this pocket of David and Harriet together, and you felt like you were in their heads and in that experience with them, and the rest of the world kind of fell away. And then we'd sort of have the soundscape kind of come back and the diegesis come back. And same thing with at the end of the movie with the Roxy Music track, or with the Loud Places Jamie XX track. There are these moments that the score kind of interacts with the diegetic track, but then kind of harmonizes, creates. I was interested in this idea of frisson, which is just like what happens. You get goosebumps when you listen to certain music, and so we wanted to create frisson in certain moments in the movie through the music.
Success, I would say, honestly. Like, beautiful.
Oh yeah, I mean, Ansel probably had a better gauge of that in his audience. Mine was just a few people in the screening room on the Disney lot, but like I just felt it, like on some of those moments for sure. And if any movie ever needed a vinyl release, it was surely this one. I need one myself. Like I have to get my hands on it. But in this age of streaming and digital copies, was it difficult to get the studio on board with that vinyl release?
They were open to it. I think I really bullied them into, or pushed as hard as I could. Like at first they were like, two sides, black vinyl. I was like, no, guys, like I need a gatefolds. I need double vinyl. We need to like, you can't like limit the soundtrack and distill it into like this, like we need to really like let it be something bigger. And I want to do colored vinyl. And I think, we talked about what do the sides look like. So like you know, one side is Harriet and Max, the other side is Harriet and David. The side C is Morris's music with Harriet, and then side D is all of Harriet's stuff and some of the score and Ryan's tracks and Nellie's song. So it was a fun kind of process, like figuring out what the vinyl looked like and producing that project.
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah, I was a little disappointed that Friday I'm in Love, the cover isn't on the soundtrack, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously licensing stuff but
Yeah.
that song already exists through Spotify. I guess it was a Spotify special that they did with.
Oh, is that where that came from? Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have like a
You can add it to your own playlist.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of playlists, do you have just like a huge playlist of all of Harriet's safe songs?
I did. Yeah, we did. Initially, like, we were looking at safe songs. I mean, if you look at that wall, there's a ton of songs written on there with dates and, what they represented and, or whether they were safe or not. So it was kind of like this murder board, for lack of a better word, for her kind of like piecing together the entirety of their relationship through music.
Yeah, I've watched the movie 3 times at this point, and I tried not to pause it, to look at the board, the wall, but I did catch Kenny G. What are some of the other songs that people might be surprised to find on the wall there?
We had some Bob Dylan. There was All We Ever Wanted Was Everything by Bauhaus. Peter Murphy from Bauhaus was in a later Maxell ad, like after the Blown Away ads. I think he was like a model for one of the later ones, so that was like a little thrown to him. Frank Ocean's Siegfried, which is a big song for me. I mean, there were tons,
Well, you mentioned that song being a big one for you. Harriet goes through a lot of these painful memories with Max from listening to these songs. But what's a song that you would listen to over and over again for a happy moment to go back to?
I have a ton. I mean, "Spinning Away" by Brian Eno and John Cale reminds me of my wife. I love that track so much. Trying to think. The Patty Joe track is a big one for me. Like "Make Me Believe in You" is a fun one. Gosh, let's see. What have I been listening to? "Move Me Baby" by Gwen McCrae. "Give" by Harari. Like those are some fun ones that have been kind of like keeping me upbeat recently and reminding me of good times. And then, if I go back to college, like Outkast, Anconia, that whole album.
Oh yeah.
They played the Steps at Columbia the week that I graduated, and that was
Whoa.
one of the most fun concerts I've ever
That's
been
awesome.
to in my life.
Lucky.
Yeah, it was insane. It was so crazy and fun.
Man, they always pull out all the stops for college students. I went to school in Philadelphia, and the Roots playing on the Art Museum stairs.
Yeah, so cool. We were on the library stairs when we saw, Outkast play, and it was so cool.
Awesome.
So
we here at Time to Party like to give a good reason for our listeners to rewatch these movies. So we give them some drinking and smoking rules so that they can follow along during their second time around, or their first time if they want, I guess. Who's to say? We're not going to judge. If you could create a rule for our listeners to follow, what would that be?
a rule to follow in what sense?
Like drink every time this happens, or something like that.
We like to look for something repeating that you might not otherwise have noticed was a theme. For example, in Terminator, we noticed that James Cameron loves to shoot from the wheels on the ground up. So every time you do wheels on the ground, that was a great drinking rule. It really showed us something about Cameron's shooting style.
There's a lot of like little Easter eggs in this movie. I don't know, I mean, I think if you look at the books in Harriet's life, there's like the Eckhart Tolle Power of Now next to her chair, and then at the end of the movie, there's the Musicophilia Oliver Sacks book that she's carrying around. I mean, there's a lot of like hi-fi Easter eggs too. But but I'm trying to think like what would like my
Maybe
mom
just
makes it.
every time we zoom in on a title.
Yeah.
That's something that you came back to a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That could be a good one. I'm trying to think just like we had a lot of like I mean, we were doing a lot of push-ins on sliders and stuff. So like, if you look for the like particularly the one on the needle on the record or like Harriet sitting there or just like if you look at the needle on the record every time there's time travel happening,
Yep.
the needle and the record have an interaction. So even in the first shot, like paying attention to like it's subtle, but if you look closely, you'll see that sort of connection start to glow. So I think maybe every time you see one of those glows, you can have a shot.
Awesome.
That's
I
great.
love that. The third element of our podcast is edutainment, where we like to take a shallow dive to learn something new about like technology that we were inspired by or that appeared in the film. So, was there anything that you really like, like fun facts that you found while writing the movie or while shooting the movie that you think would be fun to share?
Or something you really like nerded out about.
Well, the production designer really got into like slit scan and looking at that in terms of like we were looking at album covers like Hot Rocks and movies like All That Jazz, that had frames where like there were these like slit scan effects that were happening. But gosh, we did so much practically. It's almost like we were like anti-technological. Like we rigged a chair with wheels, and then we're made a room out of we created that room with duvetine and then put like light tubes all up, and that was like time travel
That's
for us. And then we were flaring the lens with a flashlight. So Chung Hoon, the DP, basically his arm was exhausted all the time because we'd be either doing the time travel sequence where she kind of like moves on the chair and then goes backwards into that space, and he's next to the lens, just like shaking his arm, like trying to flare it. And when we were doing that whole dance sequence at Bears in Space, same thing. He's next to the lens, as the Steadicam operator, the Ronin operator was just like moving, and then he'd just be like next to the lens, like flaring it, because we wanted to sort of use these elements, these flare elements, as this callback to the time travel and this sort of emotional, psychological experience with the flare. So a lot of it was kind of like DIY. We're gonna rig a chair this way, and we're gonna use a flashlight here, and we're gonna just throw up some duvetine and some light tubes, and that's how we create time travel. Not nothing too high tech. Despite we got to use, I think we were one of the first films to use the Alexa 35 camera. We used some awesome anamorphic lenses from Apollo and Atlas, and so
That's super cool. That pretty much aligns with like the use of vinyl and physical media throughout the story. That behind the scenes, you guys were also doing it old school in a sense.
Yeah, I think there's this idea in the movie about tangible objects and like the idea of a record, the idea of a hi-fi, the idea of the antique store, his father's old car, even his like vintage clothes. Like each of these objects carries a story with them. They carry a sense of the past, and we hang on to these things, and these objects can communicate with us to a degree. And I think like instead of it being a song, it can be a car, and I think part of the beauty of these things is that they do carry the story, but also they tether us to the past. And sometimes it's about letting go of these things in order so you can move into whatever your next experience in life is.
I love that. As someone who has or had a lot of collections of things, toys and just random movie props and things like that, I can totally relate to that. Do you have anything from set that will break you back to that time? Hey, love it.
This was the last shot of the movie.
Cool.
Incredible.
Yeah, so they got me that. The camera department gave me that. I have this pair of headphones that's hanging on the wall when she first goes out and puts on Peggy Lee. If you like see, there's like a coat rack filled with headphones, and these Celeste ones, I got to
That's
keep.
cool. That's so awesome.
How did they go about sourcing all of the headphones for this movie?
We, obviously props department and art department do that, but we also we did a brand partnership with Bowers and Wilkins as well. So I was a big Bowers fan. Obviously, they did studio monitors, for the Beatles, and they have a crazy history. So I wanted everything in the movie to have like a cool history to it. So we were honoring, the history of hi-fi equipment, people who love records, people who love, who if you're paying attention to the detail of this thing, you'll feel the authenticity of someone who was a sound engineer, was, or had kept her boyfriend's hi-fi, you want to feel like you finding those Easter eggs in there, if you know how to pay attention to them or for them.
Cool. So before our time runs out, I do really want to touch on this just because I'm such a big Marvel and MCU fan. You did work on Black Widow, so I was wondering how much of that story that you originally wrote appeared on the screen.
Enough for me to get a story credit. I think Jack had sort of set the table, and they knew a lot of what their big action sequences were, and I helped fill in some of the relationships and create those characters and the dynamics of those things, and think about who Red Guardian was and what his attitude was, and think about Natasha and her sister, and set everything up and set the table for it. So my script was the one that got greenlit, and then I went to London to work in pre-production for a month, and then I moved on. So, and they moved on. So, but it was an awesome experience, and I was lucky to be a part of it, and happy that they only had, when I was hired, they had like 4 months to get a draft greenlit, and we did it in 2. So that was I felt good about that. And, but these are big, massive machines, these movies. So
how do you feel about Yelena and her storyline since her introduction in Black Widow? Like, how about where she is now?
I think I love her in that movie. I think Florence did such a good job.
Stole that,
and it was such a fun dynamic, and just the sort of comedy of it. But I think she is in a sense the heir apparent. So I guess we'll see what continues to happen.
And in
Thunderbolts asterisk.
Yeah. And in an interview with IndieWire, you said that you're open to anything as long as you're suitable for the job. So if you were to return to Marvel Studios, would you want to revisit the characters you've already worked with, or play with all the new toys?
Either or. Is that fair?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, they've closed. Well, they never closed the loop. The loop is always open. So, I'm just, again, it's like when opportunities come to you, you again see if you're the right person for the job. And we all want good movies out there, and we all want to work on things that get made. And I think it's a big collaborative medium that we're in. So we all are doing our best to put out stuff that people are entertained by. These movies and these projects are for the audience. You put them together, and then you let them go, and they stop being yours anymore. So that's what the fun of it is. It's this dialogue about what other people project onto a movie, and then we talk about it.
Yes,
like this.
I love this. I love all of it. So the last thing that I wanted to bring up was 8777 Cars for Kids.
Oh yeah.
What a great moment. And like the comedy of it like hit so good, but it came at such a pivotal moment in the movie. You know, were you tempted to put in more gags like that in the movie, and how did you eventually come to that jingle to be the one?
For sure. I mean, we definitely wanted, there's this idea of Harriet controlling her own space and the music that she listens to, in the safety of her soundproofed home, and in the safety of her headphones and her car and the library that she works in. But then there's the uncontrolled world, and I think what we don't realize sometimes is how assaulted by sound and music we are in our daily lives. So a car drives by, anything could be coming out of there. You walk into a cafe, music is playing. So it was this sort of uncontrolled space where we wanted to think, aside from just music or traditional song, what could that be? And I thought about a commercial jingle, and thought about like the farmers insurance ad, like, we are farmers. I was like, oh, that doesn't have the land. Yeah, I'm like, you're looking for things that, like the juicy fruit gum ad. I was like, was that, but maybe people can't reference that anymore. So it was like something that still had to be ubiquitous, that was still around, that would make sense as an ad popping up, not only in that present but in that past moment. So like it's an interesting puzzle to sort of like think about. And I'm actually shocked that so many people, like, obviously that song has driven me nuts for years, but like, uh, it's an earworm, but it's it just made sense for the moment. It was funny. It was people had experience with it, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
So I think it was just it made sense in both sort of spaces and times, and it had the sort of comic kick. And yeah, do I wish there were more moments like that in the movie? For sure. I mean, I didn't want to get too cute with it, you know, but that one felt right in that moment.
Yeah.
My friend Zachary Shevich basically called it one of the best cinematic needle drops of all time. Oh, I loved it. I
Yeah.
thought I was going to freak out in that screening room, but I didn't want to get judged by the other critics.
Oh no! I wish you had. I wish you had. Who knows how seriously everybody takes
Right.
themselves? But I'm glad you got a kick out of it.
Our screening laughed pretty loudly, as I recall. So I'm
Yeah.
It did hit. It did hit.
Yeah. Well, that was a fun one too.
Ned, thank you so much for talking to us today. This has been so great.
Of course. No, thanks for having me. Love being on your show. Thanks for all the fun questions, and thanks for talking about
Of course.
movies.
Anything you want to plug before we say goodbye?
Like the movie?
I mean, any other projects you got coming down the pike?
I have this movie with Scarlett Johansson and Andrea Arnold that we're looking to shoot either end of this year, beginning of next, that I'm a writer on. That's very exciting.
Oh,
called Featherwood. Much darker story, but true story. And I'm excited about that. And yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff in the pipeline that I can't quite talk about yet, but hopefully soon. And yeah,
awesome.
we'll see. We'll
All
see.
right, cool. Well, we look forward to sharing all that goodness when it comes out with all of our listeners.
Well, thank you both, Ben and Ansel. It's
Awesome.
been fun.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you, Ned.
You too. Have a good one.
Wow, what an interview.
Party people, I hope you're having as much fun listening to our interviews as we have doing them. Hopefully we can get more in the future. I have some ideas in the works, so we'll see if any of them play out.
Way to get a Marvel reference in there. Proud of you.
Oh, I had to. How could I not?
We'd all be disappointed, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. Well, party people, as you're winding down from that interview, hopefully you're also adding the greatest hits to your watch list on Hulu or Disney Plus, since Hulu's on Disney Plus now. Also,
and ordering the vinyl of the soundtrack. And
oh man, yes, I want it. I want it so bad. Like he said, it's a beautiful 2 vinyl, 2 LP set in a gatefold. I had to do the thing with my hands to be like, what's this called? Oh, right.
Yeah, that. Yeah.
But yes, definitely go check out the greatest hits. And keep an eye out for one of the movie's stars, David Cornsweet, because Superman. He's about to be everywhere. Yeah, so we hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you check it out on all the places. Buy that vinyl. I want one. You could buy me one if you want. But while you go look up where you could buy it, you can find us on the internet. I'm at bsilverio20 on Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, Letterboxd, all that stuff.
And I am at Indecisionist on Instagram and at The Indecisionist on Twitter and all the other places. All the meta properties, find me there. Yeah.
You can use the hashtag time2party. That's time the number 2 party to join the conversation.
As well as time the number 2 party, all spelled out, thanks to Warwick.
While you're making your playlists and being haunted by music.
Whenever you want to pick a fight with a ghost.
Yes, as you're doing that, I want you all to remember to be excellent to each other.
And party on, dudes!